Welcome, curious minds, to a journey into the shadows of the past, where the threads of time weave tales of profound mystery and heartbreaking revelation. Imagine a world just a few decades removed from our own, a seemingly simpler era, where a young life, full of promise, could simply vanish. No trace, no explanation, just an agonizing void that echoed through the years, leaving a family shattered and a community haunted. For over 40 years, the disappearance of Evelyn Reed in 1979 was one of those indelible scars on the fabric of memory. A question whispered in hushed tones, defying every attempt to uncover the truth. But what if the very essence of who we are, woven into our genetic code, held the key to unlocking such a secret? What if a test, from a complete stranger, could expose a truth more shocking, more intimately tragic than anyone could have ever conceived? Prepare yourselves, because the story we're about to unveil today is a chilling testament to the enduring power of secrets and the unexpected ways destiny can weave its most devastating patterns. The year was 1979, a time when life moved with a different rhythm. Analog dreams flickered on television screens, rotary phones hummed with hushed conversations, and the promise of a long, warm summer stretched out before us. For the folks living in the quiet, tree-lined suburbs of Willow Creek, California, it was an era of seemingly uncomplicated peace, a time when doors were often left unlocked and children played outside until dusk, their laughter echoing through the twilight. It was a world where trust felt almost innate, a given woven into the very fabric of daily existence. But even in the most serene of settings, the threads of normalcy can fray, sometimes violently, leaving behind a tear that never truly mends. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a whisper that grew into a chilling silence, then a deafening void. Her name was Evelyn Reed. She wasn't a celebrity or a figure of grand historical significance. Evelyn was just Evelyn, a vibrant 28-year-old, with a laugh that could brighten even the grayest of days and a spirit that danced with an infectious optimism. She worked as a librarian at the Willow Creek Public Library, surrounded by the quiet comfort of stories, a place where the world's vast narratives unfolded on dusty shelves. Evelyn loved books, the way they transported her to different times and places, but she also loved the simple, tangible reality of her own life. Her small, cozy apartment filled with houseplants, the evening walks she took with her beloved golden retriever, Buster, and the anticipation of her upcoming engagement to her college sweetheart, Mark. Their wedding was just months away, a future shimmering with promise, a tapestry of shared dreams ready to be woven. On that fateful Tuesday in late August, the day had dawned like any other. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves of the oak trees outside her window, the morning light painting soft stripes across her bedroom floor. Evelyn had followed her usual routine. A quick breakfast of toast and coffee, a pat for Buster, and a brief, cheerful wave to her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, as she headed out the door for work. She wore a simple floral dress, her auburn hair tied back with a scarf, a small leather purse slung over her shoulder. Just another Tuesday, just another ordinary day in a perfectly ordinary life. But it wouldn't be. Evelyn never made it to the library. Not that day, nor any day after. Her absence initially went unnoticed in the hum of the morning commute. It was only when Mark, her fiancé, called the library around lunchtime, expecting to hear her familiar voice, that the first tendrils of unease began to creep in. The library staff, accustomed to Evelyn's punctuality, simply assumed she was running late or had called in sick without their knowledge. But Mark knew Evelyn, knew her habits, her meticulous nature. She wouldn't just miss work without a word, especially not on a day she was scheduled to help with a special children's reading event. His unease morphed into concern, then into a cold, tightening grip of fear. He tried her apartment. No answer. Tried her best friend, Sarah. Sarah hadn't heard from her. The calls became more frantic, the silence on the other end growing heavier with each unanswered ring. By the time dusk began to settle, casting long, mournful shadows across Willow Creek, a full-blown panic had set in. Mark rushed to her apartment, Buster's anxious barks greeting him through the closed door. The door was unlocked, a detail that would later haunt investigators. Inside, everything appeared undisturbed. The half-empty coffee cup on the counter, the newspaper folded neatly on the table, Buster's leash hanging by the door, untouched. It was as if Evelyn had simply stepped out for a moment, intending to return. But she never did. The initial hours spiraled into a chaotic blur of desperate searches. Mark, Sarah, Mrs. Henderson, and a growing number of concerned neighbors fanned out, calling her name, their voices thin against the encroaching darkness. Flashlights cut through the deepening gloom of the streets, illuminating empty porches and silent gardens. The Willow Creek Police Department was notified, but in those early stages, without any immediate signs of foul play, it was treated as a missing persons case, albeit one with an unsettling aura. The police took a report, interviewed Mark, and assured him they would look into it. But the words felt hollow, inadequate against the monstrous reality setting in. Days turned into a week bled into a month. The initial flurry of activity slowed to a grinding halt. Posters bearing Evelyn's smiling face, adorned with the words "missing" in stark red letters, appeared on lampposts and storefronts, then slowly faded, torn by the wind and rain, their hopeful pleas gradually becoming a testament to unanswered prayers. The police followed every lead, every speculative whisper, every vague sighting. They interviewed everyone Evelyn knew, her colleagues, her friends, distant relatives. They scoured the local parks, the nearby woods, the banks of Willow Creek itself. Divers searched the murky depths of the river. Nothing, not a trace, no abandoned car, no discarded belongings, no note. It was as if Evelyn Reed had simply evaporated, leaving behind only the agonizing question. Where did she go? The family, particularly Evelyn's parents, Clara and Robert, were consumed by a grief that no funeral could assuage. How do you mourn someone who isn't confirmed dead? How do you move on when hope, however faint, still clings to the edges of your despair? Mark, initially consumed by a desperate, relentless search, slowly retreated into himself, the vibrant dreams of their shared future replaced by a chilling void. Buster, Evelyn's loyal companion, would sit by the front door for hours, his ears perked, a low whimper escaping him occasionally, as if waiting for the familiar jingle of keys, for Evelyn's soft voice to call his name. But she never came. The case of Evelyn Reed became a local legend, a chilling bedtime story whispered in hushed tones, a stark reminder of the fragile line between order and chaos. Detectives assigned to the case retired, new ones inherited the cold files, but the answer remained stubbornly elusive. Over the years, theories circulated like shadows in the night. Had she run away? Was it an accidental fall? Was she the victim of some passing stranger, a random act of violence? Each theory offered a fleeting sense of possibility, only to crumble under the weight of no evidence. The case file grew thicker with reports, interviews, and dead ends, but the central mystery remained pristine, untouched by explanation. Decades passed. The rotary phones gave way to cell phones, television screens became high definition, and Willow Creek, while still peaceful, saw its share of changes. The children who played outside in 1979 were now adults, some with children of their own. Mrs. Henderson had passed away. Mark, now a graying man, lived a quiet life, forever marked by the ghost of a love lost. Evelyn Reed, the vibrant librarian with the infectious laugh, became a photograph in a dusty album, a name whispered with a sigh, a riddle etched into the community's collective memory. Her disappearance was a permanent scar, a wound that refused to heal, a question that echoed through generations. What happened to Evelyn Reed? The answer, it seemed, was buried deep, guarded by time and silence, awaiting a revelation that no one, not even in their wildest nightmares, could have predicted. Decades rolled on, blurring the edges of memory, softening the sharpness of pain for some, yet deepening the ache for others. For Evelyn Reed's family, time was a cruel sculptor, eroding the hope of her return while carving an even more profound emptiness into their lives. The yellowed missing person posters had long since vanished from lampposts, replaced by newer, more urgent cries for help. Willow Creek, once gripped by the mystery, had moved on, not forgetting, but adapting, as communities do. The cold case file, tucked away in the back of the police department's archives, gathered dust, a testament to an unresolved tragedy, a lingering shadow in the town's otherwise sunlit history. But beneath the surface of everyday life, an invisible revolution was quietly unfolding, one molecule at a time. The year 2010 marked a turning point. Forensic science, once reliant on fingerprints and eyewitness accounts, was now harnessing the incredible power of DNA. What was once the stuff of science fiction was becoming reality. The ability to glean identity and connections from the tiniest, most degraded biological samples. And then came the truly revolutionary leap, the rise of genetic genealogy. This wasn't just about matching a suspect's DNA to crime scene evidence. This was about using DNA to build family trees, to trace lineage, to connect individuals across generations through the shared blueprint of life itself. It was about using the very essence of who we are to solve mysteries that had stubbornly defied every other method. It began, as many such breakthroughs do, with a seemingly innocuous email. Detective Mark Jensen, a younger, more technologically savvy investigator who had inherited the Evelyn Reed cold case file, received a message from a non-profit organization specializing in cold case investigations using genetic genealogy. They had heard whispers of the Reed case, the haunting completeness of her disappearance, and offered their expertise pro bono. Jensen, jaded by years of dead ends but open to any new avenue, cautiously agreed. He pulled the dusty evidence box from storage, a box that contained a few strands of hair found in Evelyn's apartment and a tiny, almost microscopic blood stain on a curtain. Evidence that had been collected and stored meticulously in 1979, but which held no answers until now. The sample was sent to a specialized lab, a place where dedicated scientists worked tirelessly, almost like alchemists of the modern age, extracting the fragile strands of DNA from the decades-old material. The process was painstaking, requiring immense patience and cutting-edge technology. Weeks turned into months. For Detective Jensen, it was just another long shot, another hopeful flicker in the darkness that would likely lead to nothing. He had seen too many of those. Then came the call. It wasn't the police lab. It was the genealogical team. Their voice, usually reserved, held an undeniable tremor of excitement. Detective, the lead genealogist, Dr. Eleanor Vance, said, "We have something. Not a direct hit, but a strong familial match. A very close one." Jensen's heart gave a jolt. A familial match. It meant the DNA belonged to a relative of Evelyn's, perhaps a distant cousin, but close enough to build a family tree that could potentially lead them to an answer. The journey into Evelyn's genetic past began. Dr. Vance and her team, fueled by a mixture of scientific curiosity and a profound desire for justice, embarked on the meticulous, often frustrating task of constructing a family tree. They uploaded the DNA profile to public genealogical databases, not searching for Evelyn herself, but for her relatives, people who had voluntarily submitted their DNA for ancestry purposes, unknowingly holding a piece of a decades-old puzzle. The initial matches were distant, third and fourth cousins, scattered across the country, their lives seemingly unconnected to the quiet suburbs of Willow Creek. But a single strong match emerged. A woman named Lena Miller, living in Arizona. Lena had submitted her DNA years ago, a casual curiosity about her family roots. She was a great-niece of Evelyn's, a relation so close it sent a shiver down Dr. Vance's spine. Lena had never known Evelyn. She was born in the mid-1980s, long after Evelyn vanished. But her DNA, her very genetic blueprint, held a crucial key. Lena was contacted cautiously. Detective Jensen and Dr. Vance flew to Arizona, explaining the incredible, almost unbelievable situation to a bewildered Lena. Imagine being told that your DNA holds a clue to a relative who disappeared decades before you were even born, a cold case that haunted a small town. Lena, initially hesitant, was ultimately moved by the gravity of the situation and her family's enduring pain. She agreed to help. Through Lena, the genealogists were able to expand the family tree with greater precision. They worked backwards, tracing lines, identifying common ancestors, and cross-referencing public records. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, obituaries. Each document, each name was a tiny thread, slowly weaving a more complete picture. The more they built, the more the family tree converged, pointing towards a specific branch, a direct descendant of Evelyn Reed's paternal line. And then, another match appeared, one that hit with the force of a thunderclap. It wasn't Lena's DNA they were matching to anymore, but the actual, original DNA from the crime scene, which had been enhanced and reanalyzed. A direct, unequivocal match to the mitochondrial DNA found on the bloodstain on the curtain. Mitochondrial DNA is passed down directly from mother to child. This meant the blood belonged to a direct maternal relative of Evelyn Reed's. This new match wasn't a family tree builder. It was an identity. The match was to a woman named Elara Vance. The name itself sent a ripple of confusion through the team. Elara Vance? No one in Evelyn's known family tree had that name, at least not that anyone remembered. The genealogists double-checked, triple-checked. The match was irrefutable. Elara Vance. But who was she? And why was her blood, or the blood of her direct maternal ancestor, on a curtain in Evelyn Reed's apartment in 1979? The name Elara Vance spun like a disorienting compass in Detective Jensen's mind. It wasn't a suspect. It was a ghost. A new ghost in an old case. This wasn't about finding a killer. It was about finding Evelyn, or what was left of her. But the blood, the fact that it was Elara's maternal line, hinted at a deeper, more personal connection than just a random assailant. Was this a family secret? A hidden relative? The questions multiplied, each more unsettling than the last. The initial elation of a DNA match quickly morphed into a profound sense of unease, a realization that the truth, when it finally emerged, might be far more complex and heartbreaking than anyone had ever imagined. The case of Evelyn Reed was no longer just a missing person. It was rapidly transforming into a puzzle of identity, a genetic whisper from the past threatening to expose a truth carefully guarded for decades. The name Elara Vance hung in the air, a phantom key unlocking a door to a past more twisted and tragic than anyone could have conceived. Detective Jensen, along with Dr. Vance from the genealogical team, found themselves standing at the precipice of a revelation that would shatter the comfortable narrative of Evelyn Reed's disappearance. This wasn't a random act of violence, a simple runaway, or a tragic accident. The presence of Elara Vance's mitochondrial DNA, a direct maternal link to the original victim, screamed of something far more intimate, far more chillingly personal. The investigation pivoted dramatically. The focus shifted from what happened to Evelyn to who is Elara Vance, and what is her connection to Evelyn's mother, Clara Reed? The police, now with a laser-like focus, began to dig into Clara Reed's past, a woman previously considered merely a grieving mother. They scrutinized her family history, searching for any hint of a forgotten child, a secret adoption, or a clandestine affair that could explain the unexpected genetic link. The task was daunting. Clara, a seemingly ordinary homemaker, had lived a quiet life. Her family tree, as meticulously constructed by the genealogists, showed no obvious anomalies, no hidden branches that could produce an Elara Vance. But then, a subtle discrepancy emerged, a tiny thread threatening to unravel an entire tapestry of lies. In the meticulously kept town records of Willow Creek, they found a birth certificate for a baby girl, born in 1951. Evelyn Reed was born in 1951, but a different birth weight, a slightly different time of birth, and, crucially, a different attending nurse listed on the certificate compared to Clara's own recollection from her hospital records. It was almost imperceptible, a clerical error, perhaps, but enough to trigger a deeper dive. They discovered that Clara Reed, then Clara Hayes, had indeed given birth in 1951. But not to one child, but to twins. The records were meticulously cross-referenced with old hospital logs, some faded and barely legible. And there it was, baby girl A and baby girl B. Baby girl A was recorded as healthy, thriving. Baby girl B, however, was noted as fragile, underweight, and transferred to separate care unit due to complications. A few days later, a death certificate was issued for baby girl B, citing infant respiratory distress. This baby was named Evelyn. Detective Jensen felt a cold dread creep up his spine. If Clara had twins, and one was named Evelyn and died as an infant, then who was the Evelyn Reed who vanished in 1979? And where did Alara Vance fit into this horrifying, convoluted picture? The genealogists, with renewed fervor, revisited Clara's direct maternal line, cross-referencing names against adoption records from the same time period. It was a long shot, but the possibility was chilling. The truth began to surface, piece by agonizing piece. Clara Hayes, a young woman in 1951, had indeed given birth to twin girls. One, strong and healthy, was named Evelyn. The other, frail and struggling, was given the name Alara. Due to severe medical complications, the hospital had informed Clara and her then-husband, Robert Reed, that Alara was unlikely to survive. Overwhelmed and advised by doctors to focus on the healthy child, Clara made an agonizing decision, one that was tragically common and often shrouded in secrecy in those years. Alara was placed for adoption, with the understanding that she would likely not live long. Clara and Robert were told Alara had passed away shortly after the adoption, a compassionate lie designed to spare them further grief. They buried the memory of their second twin, pouring all their love and hope into the surviving Evelyn. This was the Evelyn who grew up, lived in Willow Creek, and vanished in 1979. But Alara had not died. Against all odds, she had survived. She had been adopted by a loving family, the Vances, who raised her without ever knowing her true origins. Alara grew up, lived her life, and eventually had a daughter who then had children of her own. It was the DNA of one of Alara's grandchildren, submitted to a public database for ancestry research, that provided the crucial mitochondrial DNA match to the blood found in Evelyn Reed's apartment. The blood wasn't Evelyn's, nor a killer's. It was Alara's. But how? Why? The horror deepened. The blood found in Evelyn Reed's apartment was Alara's. This meant Alara Vance, the twin Clara believed had died, had been in Evelyn's apartment on the day of her disappearance. The implications were staggering. Alara Vance, the twin Evelyn never knew she had, was the last person to see her alive. Under intense, but compassionate, questioning, Clara Reed, now an elderly woman, finally broke. The weight of a lifetime of secret grief and a lie she believed was benevolent came crashing down. Through tears and fragmented memories, she confessed. Yes, she had twins. Yes, Alara was adopted. Yes, she was told Alara died. She believed it implicitly. The surviving twin, the Evelyn we knew, had grown up happy, oblivious to her twin's existence. But the story didn't end there. Further investigation, guided by Alara's family history, which she had, unknowingly, provided through her granddaughter's DNA, revealed a chilling encounter. Alara, now in her late 20s in 1979, had been searching for her birth parents. A simple search based on her adoption records led her, eventually, to Clara and Robert Reed. On the day Evelyn vanished, Alara had driven to Willow Creek, seeking a reunion, a connection to the biological family she never knew. She arrived at the address listed for Clara and Robert Reed. It was Evelyn's apartment. Evelyn, expecting Mark to come by, had opened the door to a stranger, a woman who looked uncannily like her, though with subtle differences. Alara, overwhelmed, blurted out her story, her identity as Evelyn's twin. The shock was immense for Evelyn. A twin? A sister she never knew existed? The initial disbelief quickly turned to a whirlwind of emotions. Confusion, excitement, perhaps a touch of fear. They talked for hours, sitting in Evelyn's cozy living room, the world outside fading into insignificance. Evelyn, a librarian, a lover of stories, was suddenly thrust into her own unimaginable narrative. But the story took a dark turn. What exactly happened during those hours remains partially shrouded in the trauma of Alara's suppressed memories. What is known, pieced together from Alara's later fragmented therapy sessions and the forensic evidence, is this: as the conversation unfolded, a profound, almost primal bond began to form, but also an undercurrent of raw, unchanneled emotion. Alara, having lived a life yearning for answers, for connection, experienced an overwhelming emotional catharsis. Evelyn, grappling with the sudden shattering of her perceived reality, felt a powerful, almost dizzying sense of discovery and disorientation. At some point, a heated discussion ensued, perhaps about their shared parents, about the secret, about the years lost. The specifics are vague, but the emotional intensity was undeniable. In a moment of extreme emotional overwhelm, Alara, who suffered from undiagnosed but severe anxiety and a history of impulsive behavior, had a sudden, violent outburst. She didn't intend to harm Evelyn. She certainly didn't intend to kill her. But in the chaos, a heavy, antique letter opener from Evelyn's desk, a gift from Mark, was grabbed. The struggle was brief, brutal. Evelyn fell, struck by the opener, bleeding. Alara, horrified, panicked. The blood on the curtain was hers, from a frantic attempt to clean the wound on her hand after she accidentally cut herself during the struggle, or perhaps as she tried to stem Evelyn's bleeding. In a state of profound shock and terror, believing she had accidentally killed her newly discovered twin, Alara did the unthinkable. She moved Evelyn's body, driven by an instinct to hide the terrifying truth, to erase the impossible accident. She drove to a remote, wooded area she vaguely remembered from childhood trips, buried Evelyn hastily, and then, consumed by guilt and trauma, fled. She created a new life for herself, thousands of miles away, trying to bury the memory of that day, convincing herself it was a nightmare, a twisted figment of her imagination. The trauma was so severe that over time, her mind, as a self-preservation mechanism, fractured the memory, creating a void where that day should have been. The stranger whose DNA exposed the truth was Evelyn's own twin, unknowingly carrying the genetic marker of the secret that haunted her family. The shocking twist was not just the identity of the person whose DNA was found, but the profound, heartbreaking connection she shared with the vanished woman. The revelation of Alara Vance's true identity and the horrifying circumstances of Evelyn Reed's disappearance sent shockwaves not only through the quiet town of Willow Creek but also through the very heart of forensic science. This was a case that redefined the power of genetic genealogy, demonstrating its unparalleled ability to unearth truths buried under decades of silence and forgotten traumas. But for the individuals involved, the scientific triumph was overshadowed by the profound, wrenching human tragedy that unfolded. Clara and Robert Reed, now elderly and frail, faced a truth more devastating than perpetual uncertainty. Their Evelyn was gone, and the circumstances of her death, tied to a twin they believed lost, were a fresh wound on an already scarred soul. The years of guilt Clara had carried for giving up Alara, a burden she thought she had laid to rest with a death certificate, now morphed into an agonizing realization that her decision, however well-intentioned, had set in motion an unimaginable chain of events. They grieved Evelyn anew, not as a missing person, but as a daughter whose life was cut short by a twist of fate, and a secret that had festered unseen for a lifetime. Their once quiet home in Willow Creek became a focal point for media attention, a place where the weight of their private sorrow became a public spectacle. The once cherished memories of Evelyn were now intertwined with the painful, undeniable reality of Alara's existence and the tragic collision of their fates. Alara Vance, now a woman in her 70s, was located living a quiet, unassuming life under an assumed name in a small town far across the country. Her mind, ravaged by the unprocessed trauma of that day in 1979, had indeed suppressed the memory, replacing it with a hazy, guilt-ridden void. When confronted by Detective Jensen and Dr. Vance, the initial disbelief gradually gave way to a torrent of fragmented flashbacks, tears, and a profound, agonizing realization. She wasn't a cold-blooded killer. She was a victim of circumstance, of undiagnosed mental health struggles, and of a moment of sheer, unimaginable panic. The full confession, when it finally came, was a harrowing account of shock, fear, and a desperate, misguided attempt to undo an irreparable act. Alara was not charged with murder. The evidence, including the accidental nature of the injury and her clear mental state at the time of concealment, supported a charge of manslaughter, but given her age, fragile health, and the complex, tragic circumstances, the district attorney made the difficult decision not to pursue charges. Instead, Alara was placed under psychiatric care, where she could finally begin to process the trauma that had haunted her for over 4 decades. Her family, who had known her as a gentle, if sometimes eccentric, woman, struggled to reconcile the person they knew with the unfathomable truth of her past. They were left to grapple with the legacy of a secret they never knew existed, a secret that had directly impacted the life and death of a twin they never knew they had. The discovery of Evelyn Reed's remains, painstakingly recovered from the remote, wooded grave Alara had described, brought a bittersweet sense of closure to her family. After 40 years, Evelyn was finally home. A private funeral was held, attended by those who had loved her and never given up hope. Mark, Evelyn's heartbroken fiancé, now a man in his early 70s, stood silently by her grave, the decades of unanswered questions finally replaced by a painful, yet definitive, ending. The promise of their shared future, once so vivid, now lay forever entombed with the woman he had loved. He found a measure of peace in knowing what happened, but the scar of her loss remained, a testament to the profound impact of that one fateful day. The case of Evelyn Reed became a somber reminder of the hidden depths within families, the secrets carried across generations, and the unexpected ways in which technology can bring light to the darkest corners of human experience. It was a story that highlighted the fragility of life, the devastating consequences of panic, and the enduring power of genetic connections, even when those connections are initially concealed by layers of deception and trauma. The truth, when it finally emerged, was not a simple narrative of good versus evil, but a complex, multi-layered tragedy, born from a web of circumstances, misunderstandings, and desperate decisions made in a time when options were few and secrets were easily kept. Detective Jensen, deeply affected by the case, reflected on the sheer serendipity of it all. The distant cousin who submitted her DNA, the meticulous work of the genealogists, the chance encounter that led Alara to Evelyn's door that fateful day. It was a testament to the fact that sometimes justice doesn't come from brilliant detective work alone, but from the slow, relentless march of scientific progress and the unintended consequences of human choices. The case of Evelyn Reed will forever be etched in the annals of cold case investigations, not just for its resolution, but for the haunting, almost poetic way in which a stranger's DNA test unveiled the truth about a vanishing that echoed across half a century. And so, the story of Evelyn Reed, a woman who vanished in 1979 and whose truth was revealed by the very bloodline she never knew she shared, stands as a stark, emotional testament. It's a story of loss, of discovery, and of the profound, often tragic, intricacies of human connection. It's a reminder that sometimes, the answers we seek lie not in the obvious, but in the unseen threads that bind us all, waiting patiently in our very genes to be unraveled. If this story resonated with you, if the echoes of Evelyn's vanishing touched your heart, then I urge you to join our community. Hit that like button to show your support, subscribe to our channel for more stories that delve into the mysteries of the past, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the unexplained. Your engagement helps us bring these vital, often overlooked, narratives to light. Thank you for listening.